Welcome to the Deep Sleep Science Channel. Tonight, we're gently descending beneath the surface of the Earth into a hidden world where entire landscapes stretch silently in the dark, where rivers flow without ever seeing the sky, and where crystals can grow for thousands of years without a single disturbance. Far below our feet, there are vast underground networks longer than entire countries, ancient chambers that have remained untouched for tens of thousands of years, and delicate mineral formations that took longer to form than human civilization has existed. Some caves hold the oldest art ever created by humans, while others contain life that has never seen light and has adapted in ways that seem almost unreal. As we slowly explore this quiet underground world, you'll discover how caves form, how they preserve history, how life survives in complete darkness, and how these hidden spaces connect deeply to the world above us, in ways most people never realize. So before you settle in and let your mind drift, take a moment to like, subscribe, or leave a comment, and then allow yourself to gently follow this journey downward into the calm, timeless world of caves. Mammoth Cave is the longest known cave system in the world. That means no other mapped cave system on Earth has yet surpassed it in total known length, which gives it a special place in cave science. When people picture a cave, they often imagine one chamber or one tunnel. But Mammoth Cave is something far larger and more intricate than that. It is an underground network on the truly continental feeling scale. What makes Mammoth Cave even more astonishing is that its known length is more than twice that of any other known cave system. That is an extraordinary gap. It is not just a little longer than the next system on the list, but dramatically longer, which helps show how unusually vast and complex it really is. In the world of caves, it stands in a category that feels almost oversized compared with the rest. More than 426 miles of Mammoth Cave Passage have been surveyed and mapped. That distance is difficult to picture in daily life because it turns an underground cave into something that stretches as far as a very long regional journey. And that number refers only to passages that people have actually explored, measured, and added to the official map. The cave is not imagined to be huge. It has been physically documented, mile after mile. Wind Cave is one of the oldest known caves in the world, with portions estimated at over 300 million years old. That means parts of this underground system may trace back to a span of time far older than dinosaurs. A cave of that age is not just a hollow place in rock. It is a surviving piece of deep Earth history, preserved across unimaginable stretches of geological time. Letugea Cave, within the Carlsbad Cave region, is the nation's second deepest limestone cave at 604 feet. That depth gives it a strong vertical dimension that feels very different from simply being long. In practical terms, it means the cave reaches far down into the earth through a system of shafts, passages, and levels. It is one of those places that reminds people that caves can descend as dramatically as mountains rise. The same cave, Letugea, has also been described as the world's 7th longest cave. So its fame does not rest on depth alone. It combines great depth with great length, which is a rare and powerful combination in cave systems. That is one reason it has become so important to scientists and explorers alike. Letugea Cave is famous for gypsum chandeliers that can reach about 20 feet in length. These are not decorative objects placed there by people, but natural mineral formations that grew in darkness over vast periods of time. To imagine a cave crystal feature hanging downward for the height of a small room is to understand just how strange and beautiful underground mineral growth can become. Nature, given enough time, can create forms that feel almost architectural. The same cave also contains gypsum hairs and beards roughly 20 feet long. These are delicate mineral growths, far longer than most people would ever expect from something so fine and fragile. Their size shows that caves are not only places of rock walls and empty chambers. They are also places where chemistry can produce features so thin, soft-looking, and extended that they seem almost impossible until they are seen. Lechuguilla has documented soda straws about 18 feet long. A soda straw, in cave terms, is a thin, hollow mineral tube, and most people imagine them as small, delicate features, only inches or perhaps a foot or two in length. But in this cave, they can grow to lengths that completely change that mental picture. It reveals how cave conditions, when stable for very long periods, can allow even fragile formations to reach extraordinary sizes. Wind Cave is globally famous for boxwork, a honeycomb-like pattern of calcite fins that project from the walls and ceilings. Instead of looking like drips or icicles, these formations form angular networks that seem almost engineered. They create surfaces that look delicate and geometric at the same time. Among cave features, boxwork is one of the most visually distinctive because it does not resemble the common dripstone shapes most people expect. Wind Cave contains so much well-developed boxwork that it is considered the world's most abundant major display of that feature. In other words, this is not a cave with just a few good examples. It is one of the greatest known places on Earth for seeing boxwork at meaningful scale. That abundance makes Wind Cave not only beautiful, but scientifically important, because it preserves this rare formation more extensively than anywhere else known. Carlsbaderia caves are famous because sulfuric acid, not just ordinary carbonic acid groundwater, played a major role in dissolving the limestone there. This is striking because many people learn that caves usually form from mildly acidic water moving down from the surface. But here, a more powerful acid chemistry was involved. That makes Carlsbad an important reminder that caves do not all follow the same underground story. In the Guadalupe Mountains, bacteria feeding on sulfur helped generate sulfuric acid that transformed limestone and left abundant gypsum behind. This means microbes were not just passive passengers in the cave environment. They were part of a chemical system that helped reshape the rock itself. It is a remarkable example of biology and geology working together in darkness, with microscopic life contributing to the making of enormous underground spaces. Lava Beds National Monument contains more than 800 caves. That is a remarkable number in one region, and it gives the area an entirely different character from landscapes with just a few isolated caves. Instead of one famous opening, it is a whole terrain of underground volcanic passages. The number alone shows how powerfully volcanism can shape subterranean worlds. Apostle Island's famous winter ice caves are actually seasonal ice formations that develop around sea caves and sandstone cliffs, rather than permanent frozen cave interiors. This makes them especially striking because they depend on a temporary meeting of rock, water, cold air, and winter weather. They are not fixed underground ice worlds that remain unchanged all year. They are seasonal works of ice sculpture made by the environment during brief windows of time. Caves can also be flooded later by rising sea level, turning what was once a dry cave into a marine cave. That means some caves have lived more than one life. They may begin as dry spaces people or animals could enter on foot, then later become submerged parts of coastal or underwater systems. It is a vivid example of how changing oceans can completely transform the identity of a cave. The decorated cave of Pont d'Arc, better known as Chauvet Cave, contains some of the earliest known figurative drawings in the world. These are not just marks or simple patterns, but images created with recognizable intention and skill. That makes the cave one of the great surviving records of early human imagination. Deep underground, it preserves evidence that human artistic expression was already highly developed tens of thousands of years ago. Chauvet Cave remained sealed by a rock fall for about 20,000 years, and that helped preserve it in exceptional condition. In a way, the collapse acted like a protective door made by nature. Because the cave was closed off for so long, its art and interior conditions were shielded from the kinds of disturbance that often damage ancient sites. Sometimes preservation comes not from planning, but from a long accident of geology. The caves of the Swabian Jura in Germany are important because they yielded some of the oldest known figurative art and the oldest known musical instruments. That means these caves preserve evidence not only of visual imagination, but also of music. They suggest that very early humans were already making art, carving figures, and creating instruments capable of producing sound. In that sense, caves are not only records of stone and water, but also records of early human creativity. Cueva de las Manos in Argentina is famous for stenciled human hands painted on cave walls. These hand images are simple in one way, yet deeply powerful in another, because they feel so direct and personal. They are traces of real people placing their presence onto stone thousands of years ago. A human hand on a cave wall can create an immediate bridge between the distant past and the present moment. Many of the world's best-known caves occur in karst landscapes, where soluble bedrock has been dissolved into sinkholes, springs, sinking streams, and underground passages. Karst is one of the great cave-making landscapes of Earth. It is not defined by one single opening in the ground, but by an entire connected system of surface and underground features. When people speak of classic cave country, they are often speaking about karst. In karst regions, much of the rainwater quickly moves underground through cracks, fractures, and openings, instead of staying in surface channels. So rather than lingering above ground in ordinary streams, water often slips into the rock itself. Over time, that hidden movement becomes one of the main forces shaping the landscape. It helps explain why karst regions can feel like places where the ground is constantly swallowing and redirecting water. One reason karst landscapes often have so little surface drainage is that water is captured below ground and rerouted through underground pathways. This means the landscape can look surprisingly dry or lacking in normal stream networks at the surface, even when a great deal of water is moving through it. The water has not disappeared. It has simply changed level and continued its journey in darkness. Karst aquifers are often highly productive sources of groundwater, but that same fast water movement also makes them vulnerable to contamination. Because water can move through them quickly, they can supply large amounts of groundwater. But the downside is that pollutants can also travel rapidly with less filtering than people might expect. So the same feature that makes karst useful can also make it fragile. Not all caves form in the same way, because underground openings can develop through dissolution, volcanic activity, wave action, glacier-related processes, or collapse. This is important because the word cave sounds simple, but it actually covers many different natural histories. Some caves are carved by water chemistry, others are left behind by lava, and still others are shaped by ice, waves, or falling rock. A cave is really a category of underground space, not a single recipe. The most familiar cave-forming process is chemical dissolution, in which slightly acidic groundwater slowly enlarges fractures in soluble rock. The water itself usually seems gentle, but over long periods, it is surprisingly effective. It seeps into tiny weaknesses, dissolves a little rock at a time, and gradually turns small cracks into traversable passages. Caves often look dramatic, yet many begin with patient chemistry acting almost invisibly. Cave formation can happen on immense timescales, with some cave systems developing over millions of years. That means a cave is often the result of processes so slow that no human life could ever watch them from beginning to end. Passage growth, mineral change, shifts in water flow, and landscape erosion all build on one another across spans of time that belong to geology rather than history. Caves are slow architecture made by the Earth itself. Cave systems can include not only passages but also springs, sinkholes, and related landforms that are all part of one connected karst network. So a cave is often not just what lies underground. It is part of a larger system that includes where water enters, where it moves, and where it returns to the surface. To really understand a cave, you often have to understand the whole landscape around it. A cave system is often only partly known, because mapped passages represent explored sections rather than the full underground extent. In other words, a cave map is usually a record of what humans have reached so far, not necessarily a final picture of the whole system. There may be side passages, hidden chambers, or blocked routes still waiting beyond the known map. Even famous caves can remain incomplete in human understanding. Caves are often closely linked to springs, because underground water moving through passages can re-emerge where rock layers or topography force it back to the surface. A spring, in that sense, can be the visible return point of a hidden underground journey. Water vanishes into rock somewhere else, travels through darkness, and then appears again in daylight. Caves and springs are often two parts of the same hydrologic story. In karst regions, pollution can move quickly underground, with relatively little natural filtration compared with some other aquifer types. This makes contamination especially concerning in cave-bearing landscapes. A substance spilled or washed into the ground may not stay local for long. It can enter the subsurface quickly and travel through a hidden network that many people never see. Cave-bearing limestone terrains can hold major groundwater resources, which is one reason cave geology matters far beyond tourism or recreation. These landscapes are not important only because people like to visit caves. They are also important because they can store and transmit water that communities depend on. Cave science, in that sense, connects directly to public water, land use, and environmental protection. Gypsum caves exist because gypsum is even more soluble than limestone, allowing water to enlarge openings rapidly under the right conditions. Since gypsum dissolves readily, caves in it can develop differently from those in harder or less soluble rock. This shows again that cave formation is strongly influenced by the chemistry of the host material. The rock type matters enormously in shaping the underground result. Cave-bearing landscapes often show a strong connection between what happens on the surface and what happens underground, because surface water can directly enter the subsurface. In many places, the boundary between surface and cave is not as separate as it first appears. Rain, runoff, soil processes, and human activity above ground can all influence what happens below. The underground world is hidden, but it is not isolated. A cave can be older than the valley above it, because the underground void may predate later erosion at the surface. This can feel counterintuitive, since people often assume the visible landscape came first. But in some cases, the cave was already there, while the overlying terrain continued to change. The surface valley may be younger than the darkness beneath it. Cave passages often follow structural weaknesses in rock, such as fractures, bedding planes, and joints. Water does not usually dissolve rock in a completely random way. It tends to exploit places where the rock is already easier to enter and enlarge. Over time, these weaknesses become the guiding lines along which larger underground routes develop. Because cave development depends on water chemistry, geology, and time, cave-rich regions are often highly variable, even over short distances. One hillside may contain many openings, while a nearby area may contain very few. One cave may be wet, branching, and active, while another close by may be dry and still. Caves are shaped by multiple conditions at once, and small changes in those conditions can lead to very different results. Lava tubes are caves made by volcanic eruptions rather than by dissolving rock. This makes them a very different kind of cave from the classic limestone example. Instead of being carved slowly by groundwater, they are created by molten rock during eruptions. The underground space is left behind not by removal through dissolution, but by the draining away of lava. A lava tube can begin when the surface of a lava flow cools and hardens, while molten lava continues moving underneath. The top becomes a kind of roof, while the inside remains hot and mobile. This creates a temporary channel enclosed by solidifying rock. If conditions continue in that pattern, a cave can begin to take shape inside what was once flowing lava. When the lava drains away from that roofed-over channel, it leaves an empty tube that functions as a cave. So the cave is really the abandoned pathway of former molten rock. The process is simple to describe, but dramatic in consequence. What was once a river of fire can become a cool, dark tunnel of stone. Ice caves and glacier ice caves are not the same thing. The names sound similar, but they refer to different kinds of environments and different origins. This distinction matters because cave language can be misleading if it groups unlike things together. In geology and cave science, the details of formation are important. A rock cave that keeps ice all year is called an ice cave, while a cave that forms within glacier ice is a glacier ice cave. One is a cave in rock that contains persistent ice. The other is a cave made in the ice itself. That difference changes everything from how the cave forms to how stable it is and how long it may last. Some ankyline caves and blue holes are flooded karstic sinkholes or caves connected to the sea through porous rock rather than by an opened surface channel. So even when no obvious surface opening joins them to the ocean, they can still be part of a marine-influenced system. These caves show how water can connect environments in ways that are not immediately visible. They are hidden meeting points between land, stone, and sea. Ankyline waters are often brackish and tidally influenced even when the cave or pool has no visible surface link to the ocean. That means their water can rise, fall, and mix under the quiet influence of distant marine forces. It is a subtle kind of connection, but a real one. The sea can affect a cave without appearing in plain view. Blue holes often look dark from above because they are openings into deeper submerged limestone caverns. Their color is not just a surface effect. It reflects depth, shadow, and the opening into a larger underwater space below. Seen from above, they can appear like still, dark eyes in the landscape. Cave scientists study both the passage geometry and the surrounding landscape because caves are only one visible part of larger karst systems. A cave passage by itself tells only part of the story. Scientists also want to know how water enters, where it flows, what rocks it moves through, and how the broader terrain is organized. The underground map and the surface map often need to be read together. The scientific study of caves is called speleology. It is a field that brings together geology, hydrology, biology, archaeology, and careful observation of the underground world. The word may sound specialized, but the idea is simple. It is the disciplined study of caves and cave systems. Caves are so complex that they require their own branch of scientific attention. Speleologists do more than map tunnels. They also study cave animals, groundwater, rocks, fossils, and archaeological remains. In that sense, a cave scientist is not focused on one single type of knowledge, but on many layers of information gathered in one place. A cave can hold evidence of living systems, ancient climates, human history, and geological process all at once. Cave mapping changes over time because explorers continue discovering side passages, connections, and extensions in systems once thought to be fully known. A cave map is therefore something alive in a scientific sense. It can grow, shift, and become more complete as people return with better methods and new discoveries. Even places explored for generations can still surprise those who study them. Caves are often natural laboratories because they preserve long records of geological, biological, and human history in a single place. Inside one cave, scientists may find clues about water movement, mineral growth, animal adaptation, ancient art, or preserved objects from long ago. Very few environments gather so many different kinds of evidence together so quietly. That is part of what makes caves endlessly fascinating to study. Karst terrain forms mainly in rocks such as limestone and dolomite, though marble and gypsum can also develop karst features. This happens because these rocks can slowly dissolve when water moves through them over long periods of time. Limestone is the most famous example, but it is not the only rock that can host caves, sinkholes, and underground drainage. The broader lesson is that caves are strongly shaped by the kind of rock they grow in, and different rocks respond to water in different ways. Caves can preserve objects unusually well because they are protected from sunlight, wind, and many of the weathering forces that work constantly at the surface. A bone, tool, footprint, or piece of ancient material inside a cave may remain in much better condition than it would outside in open air and changing weather. The cave does not stop time, but it often slows damage by providing a stable and sheltered environment. That protective quality is one reason caves are so important to archaeologists and paleontologists. A sinkhole is essentially a closed depression with no natural external surface drainage, so water that enters it usually drains underground. Instead of flowing out across the land like it would from an ordinary basin, the water often moves downward into cracks, conduits, or cave passages beneath the surface. This makes sinkholes one of the clearest signs that a landscape is connected to a hidden underground system. They are surface features, but they act like doors into the subsurface. Disappearing streams are a classic sign of karst landscapes, where flowing surface water can suddenly vanish into the ground. To someone seeing it for the first time, it can feel almost unnatural, as though the stream has simply been swallowed by the earth. But what is really happening is that the water has found an underground route and continued moving below the surface. These disappearing streams help show that in karst country, rivers do not always stay in daylight. The word karst comes from the German name for a limestone region near Trieste, which shows how closely the term is tied to the kind of terrain where caves commonly form. Over time, the name of that regional landscape became the scientific word for this broader type of dissolving rock environment. It is a reminder that scientific language often begins in a real place and then expands outward. In this case, one landscape lent its name to cave country all around the world. In some cave regions, the underground passages formed long before today's surface canyons and topography were carved. That means the cave system may preserve an older version of the landscape than the one visible above. While rivers shifted and valleys deepened over long spans of erosion, the underground spaces may already have existed below. Caves can therefore act like records of earlier stages in landscape history, holding clues about past drainage systems and ancient landforms. Some caves are hypergenic, which means they formed from below when rising acidic waters or gases dissolved the rock upward. This is different from the more familiar picture of rainwater seeping down from the surface and slowly enlarging cracks from above. In a hypergenic cave, the chemical energy can come from deeper underground. That makes these caves especially interesting, because their formation story begins beneath the level where most people expect cave-making water to start. Some landscapes contain many separate caves close together because the same rock unit was dissolved or drained in multiple places. If a wide area shares the same kind of soluble rock, the same underground processes can create many different openings and cave systems across the region. This is why cave country often feels clustered rather than random. The rock layer itself helps set the stage for repeated cave development over a broad area. Gypsum caves exist because gypsum is even more soluble than limestone, allowing water to enlarge openings rapidly when conditions are right. Since gypsum dissolves so easily, the underground spaces formed in it can respond more quickly to moving water than caves in less soluble rock. That can make gypsum cave systems especially dynamic in geological terms. It also shows that the speed of cave formation depends greatly on the chemistry of the host rock. Marble can host karst caves too, showing that cave-forming dissolution is not limited to sedimentary limestone. Marble began as limestone that was later changed by heat and pressure, but it can still remain vulnerable to dissolution under the right conditions. This is a helpful reminder that cave science is not only about one textbook rock type. The underground world can appear in several related rock settings, as long as water and chemistry can work together there. Some of the largest cave rooms on Earth were formed by chemical dissolution rather than by tectonic cracking alone. That means water chemistry, acting slowly and persistently, can create enormous underground chambers without needing a dramatic splitting of the rock by major faults. It is one of the most humbling things about caves. Processes that feel gentle at the scale of a drop of water can eventually produce spaces large enough to feel cathedral-like underground. Collapsed caves can create depressions that later fill with rainwater and groundwater, producing lakes or other basins at the surface. In such cases, the shape of the land above reflects the failure or change of an underground space below. A collapse does not always mark the end of the cave story. Sometimes it begins a new landscape feature altogether, replacing a hidden void with an open basin that collects water. Lava tubes can be understood as caves that begin as constructional volcanic features and become open caves after the lava leaves. In other words, they are first built by flowing molten rock and only later become empty underground passages. This is very different from a cave formed by dissolving rock away. A lava tube is a cave created by the departure of material that once moved through it in a molten state. A single lava river does not always become one continuous cave, because parts of the roof may collapse, or some sections may never fully solidify into an unbroken tunnel. This means lava tube cave systems can be fragmented, interrupted, or partially preserved. The final cave is shaped not only by the original lava flow, but also by where the roof held, where it failed, and where the volcanic conditions changed along the way. What remains is often only part of the full original pathway. The lava caves at lava beds are tied to the long volcanic history of Medicine Lake volcano, which has been active for roughly 500,000 years. That long span of activity means the cave landscape there is part of a much larger volcanic story, not just the result of one isolated eruption. Over many eruptions and long periods of time, volcanic processes helped build a terrain full of lava-related features. The caves are one chapter in a broader history of fire-shaped land. Volcanic cave landscapes can preserve many eruption-related features at once, including vents, craters, cinder cones, and lava tubes. This makes them especially rich for understanding how eruptions shape the surface and subsurface together. A person exploring such an area is not only seeing caves, but also the remains of different volcanic structures that helped create them. The landscape becomes a connected record of eruptive activity from multiple angles. Lava tube cave roofs are often most unstable early in their history, around the time the lava drains away and unsupported sections fail. At that stage, The roof has only recently formed, and the space beneath it may still be adjusting to the sudden absence of flowing lava. Weak sections are more likely to collapse then than after long-term settling. This helps explain why some lava caves are incomplete or broken into segments rather than preserved as perfect tunnels. At lava beds, many roof collapses happened thousands of years ago, which is why the remaining cave roofs are now considered comparatively stable. The unstable portions often failed long ago, leaving behind the sections that were strong enough to endure. That does not mean they are unchanging forever, but it does mean the current caves represent survivors of ancient structural testing. What people walk through today is often the more durable remainder of a much larger original system. Glacier ice caves can form where meltwater moves through a glacier along its margins, or where the ice passes over bumps in bedrock. These caves are created within the ice itself, and their shapes are influenced by flowing meltwater, internal ice movement, and the glacier's contact with the terrain below. They are therefore highly active and temporary compared with most rock caves. They belong to a world where the cave walls themselves are slowly moving. Rock ice caves can hold large ice features on floors, walls, and ceilings, even though the cave itself formed in rock rather than ice. That means the cave's structure and the ice inside it have different origins. The rock passage may be old and stable, while the ice accumulates later under the right temperature conditions. This combination creates a cave that is geologically rocky but visually frozen. At Apostle Islands, splashing waves and water seeping through sandstone layers help build sculpted ice when winter conditions are right. So the famous icy forms there are not random decorations. They grow from repeated freezing of water supplied by both wave action and seepage through the rock. The result is a seasonal landscape in which stone, lake water, and cold air combine to create temporary frozen architecture. The Apostle Islands ice cave phenomenon is considered rare because it depends on a delicate combination of freezing, wave conditions, and safe shoreline access. If one part of that combination is missing, the full effect may not appear or may not be safely reachable. This makes the phenomenon unusually dependent on timing and environmental balance. It is not simply a matter of winter arriving. The caves need the right winter. Diminishing ice cover can make public access to some winter cave formations less common, even when the underlying cliffs and sea caves remain. In other words, the caves may still exist, but the conditions needed to reach them safely across frozen surfaces may not occur as often. This shows how access can depend on climate and seasonal ice behavior, not just on the cave itself. A cave can remain physically present while becoming harder for people to approach. In some flooded cave systems, the water is vertically stratified, with layers that differ in salinity and oxygen. That means the water is not always fully mixed from top to bottom. One layer may be fresher, another saltier, and oxygen levels can also change with depth. These layered conditions can strongly influence what kinds of organisms live there and how the cave functions as an ecosystem. Cave scientists study both passage shape and the surrounding landscape because caves are only one visible part of larger karst systems. The passage itself may reveal where water once flowed, but the broader terrain explains where that water came from and where it may go next. Surface sinkholes, springs, ridges, and drainage patterns all help complete the picture. A cave is rarely understood fully when viewed in isolation. Cave development and cave discovery are different things because a passage may be geologically ancient even if humans only found it recently. A cave can exist for millions of years before anyone maps or enters it. This distinction matters because the age of exploration is not the age of the cave itself. Human knowledge of a cave may be new, while the cave's own story is unimaginably old. Some cave systems become world famous not because they are the deepest or widest, but because they clearly display unusual geologic processes. A cave may serve as an especially powerful example of sulfuric acid dissolution, rare mineral growth, lava tube formation, or some other uncommon underground process. Scientists value such caves because they reveal how the Earth works. Fame in cave science often comes from significance, not just spectacle. Speleothems are secondary mineral deposits that accumulate in caves after the cave passage already exists. This means the empty space forms first and the mineral decoration comes later. Water moving through the cave then begins to leave behind dissolved minerals, slowly building new structures on walls, ceilings, and floors. In a sense, speleothems are the cave's later interior growth after the room itself has already been created. Stalactites are among the best-known cave formations and hang downward from ceilings where mineral-rich water drips. Each drop leaves behind a tiny amount of dissolved material, and over very long times this process builds the hanging form little by little. Stalactites are one of the clearest examples of how slow repetition can produce dramatic results underground. 1,000 tiny deposits eventually become a visible stone feature. Stalagmites are the upward-growing counterparts that form on cave floors below dripping water. When mineral-rich drops fall from the ceiling and hit the ground, they can leave behind the same dissolved minerals there. Over time, those deposits rise from the floor into rounded or column-like forms. Stalagmites and stalactites are closely related, but they grow in opposite directions from the same dripping process. A soda straw is a thin, tubular speleothem that can later thicken into a stalactite if mineral deposition continues on the outside. In its early form, it is like a narrow, hollow pipe through which water passes at the tip. As more minerals accumulate around it, the outer surface becomes thicker and more solid. This makes a soda straw one of the most delicate early stages of hanging cave growth. Alactites are cave formations whose twisting growth patterns make them seem to ignore gravity. Instead of hanging straight down or rising straight up, they bend, curl, and branch in unexpected directions. Their shapes can be influenced by tiny water films, crystal growth forces, airflow, and very subtle cave conditions. They are reminders that not every cave formation follows the simple shapes people expect. Rimstone pools form when mineral-rich water deposits low dams that trap water in terraced basins. As the water flows and minerals settle out, raised edges slowly build up and create a step-like series of shallow pools. These can look almost like stone terraces made by design, yet they grow naturally through repeated mineral deposition. They show how flowing water can construct as well as carve. Curtains are sheet-like cave formations that often hang from sloping ceilings where water flows along a line rather than dripping from a single point. Because the water spreads out along a crack or ridge, the mineral deposit forms as a thin hanging sheet instead of a cone or column. These features can look soft or folded, even though they are made of stone. Their shape reflects the path the water chose. Shield formations can grow as paired plates of calcite and, in some caves, become remarkably large. They are especially interesting because they form in a way that creates two broad sides separated by a narrow central crack. Water moves through that crack and feeds crystal growth on both sides. The result can look surprisingly geometric, almost as if two stone panels were growing out from the wall. Gypsum flowers are delicate cave deposits of gypsum that can resemble mineral petals on dry cave surfaces. They are not flowers in the biological sense, of course, but their thin, radiating crystals can look remarkably plant-like. Their beauty comes from mineral growth under very still and dry cave conditions. They show that even in darkness, caves can produce forms that feel light and intricate. Cave snowballs are another unusual gypsum-related formation found in some dry cave environments. Their name comes from their rounded appearance, which can resemble balls of pale mineral fluff or compacted crystalline mass. These formations are another example of how gypsum can create shapes very different from common calcite dripstone. Dry cave chemistry can be just as creative as wet cave chemistry. Cave pearls are rounded mineral deposits that grow in agitated pools as layers build around a small nucleus. The movement of the water helps keep the growing pearl from attaching firmly to one spot, and that motion encourages a rounded shape. Bit by bit, the mineral coating becomes thicker. These formations show how even gentle underground water movement can shape stone into smooth, bead-like forms. Subaqueous helictites are helictite-like formations that grow underwater, showing that cave mineral growth is not limited to air-filled spaces. Even in submerged conditions, minerals can still arrange themselves into surprisingly delicate and unusual forms. This broadens the picture of cave decoration. Not all cave beauty hangs in dry chambers. Some of it grows quietly beneath the water surface. Rusticles can occur in caves as iron-rich growths, giving some passages an unexpectedly metallic or industrial appearance. Their color and texture can make cave surfaces look very different from the pale calcite scenes many people imagine. These formations remind us that caves are chemically diverse places. Iron and other elements can add very different textures, tones, and growth styles to underground environments. U-loops and U-loops are rare cave formations whose names come from their curved shapes. They stand out because their forms are so distinctive and unlike the straighter or more symmetrical cave features people usually recognize. These unusual growths show again that cave minerals can organize themselves into many unexpected patterns. The language used to name them often comes directly from the visible geometry they create. Hydromagnesite balloons are among the rarest cave formations and are notable for their inflated-looking shapes. Their appearance can seem almost soft or pressurized, even though they are mineral deposits. That unusual form makes them a striking example of how varied cave growth can become under special chemical conditions. Rare cave features like these help scientists understand just how many pathways mineral deposition can take. Some of the most spectacular cave decorations are not calcite at all, but gypsum, which forms a different set of fragile crystals and fibers. Many people associate cave beauty mainly with stalactites and stalagmites, yet gypsum opens another visual world entirely. It can create chandeliers, flowers, hairs, and other delicate forms that feel lighter and finer than typical dripstone. Cave decoration is far more varied than many first assume. Boxwork is not a dripstone feature in the usual sense, because the calcite fins remained after the surrounding rock dissolved away. That means the pattern did not grow outward from dripping water like a stalactite. Instead, the calcite-filled cracks were left standing as the surrounding material was removed. So boxwork is as much a story of subtraction as it is of mineral presence. Boxwork forms its characteristic boxes because thin calcite blades intersect at many angles across cave surfaces. Those intersecting fins create a network of enclosed or partly enclosed shapes that resemble a stone honeycomb or lattice. The pattern seems almost too organized to be natural, yet it is the result of geological structure and selective dissolution. It is one of the clearest cases where cave walls can look almost designed. Cave formations can vary dramatically between wet and dry parts of the same cave. A passage receiving regular dripping water may be rich in calcite features, while a drier chamber nearby may host fragile crystals or far fewer deposits. The difference can be surprisingly sharp, even within one connected system. Water availability and cave climate help decide what kinds of mineral growth will be possible. Wetter cave sections tend to favor calcite dripstone features such as stalactites and stalagmites. That is because active dripping and flowing water can carry dissolved minerals, and repeatedly deposit them in the same places. Over long spans of time, these wet conditions build familiar cave shapes. The steady arrival of mineral-rich water is what allows this kind of decoration to continue growing. Drier cave sections can favor crystal growths such as gypsum flowers instead of large dripping water formations. In these areas, the chemistry and moisture conditions support a different style of mineral development. Instead of building thick dripstone, the cave may produce fine, delicate, and often more fragile crystal features. Dryness changes the artistic language of the cave. The mineral colors seen in caves can include blue, green, yellow, black, white, orange, and red deposits. So caves are not only gray or pale stone environments. Their colors can reflect the presence of different minerals, impurities, chemical reactions, or staining processes. The underground world often holds a richer palette than people expect. These cave colors are not only beautiful to look at, they can also reveal different minerals and chemical conditions in the host rock and groundwater. In that sense, color can act like information. A change in hue may hint at iron, manganese, sulfur-related chemistry, or other environmental differences that shape the cave over time. Cave water is central to cave science because groundwater is not only one of the main forces that creates caves, but also one of the main things that keeps cave ecosystems alive. Water can dissolve rock, carry minerals, transport nutrients, shape passages, and feed underground streams and pools. In that sense, cave water is both a builder and a life support system. Without it, many caves would never form in the first place, and many cave organisms would have no habitat at all. In karst areas, groundwater can move through caves and fractures quickly enough that contamination may travel surprisingly far from where it began. This matters because many people imagine underground water moving slowly through dense rock, like a sponge. But in karst, water often uses cracks, channels, and open passages that let it move much faster. That means pollution can spread through the system with much less warning than people expect. Because karst aquifers are so vulnerable, activities at the surface above a cave-bearing landscape can directly affect underground water quality. What happens on farms, roads, fields, construction sites, or dumping areas does not always stay at the surface. Rain can carry materials downward into sinkholes, cracks, and recharge zones. So the health of the underground system often depends on how carefully the land above it is treated. Underground cave waters can emerge again at springs, linking hidden flow paths to surface rivers, wetlands, and habitats. A spring may look peaceful and simple at the surface, but it can represent the end point of a long underground journey. Water may have traveled through rock layers, narrow cracks, and broad passages before coming back into daylight. Springs are often where the invisible work of caves becomes visible again. In sinkholes, rainfall often drains downward instead of forming a normal surface outlet stream. That makes sinkholes behave differently from ordinary low spots in the landscape. Rather than filling up and spilling outward, they often connect to deeper underground drainage. This gives the surface terrain a kind of hidden plumbing, where water disappears into the earth instead of always moving across it. Some cave regions have very little permanent surface drainage because underground flow routes dominate the hydrology. In those places, the land may not display the obvious stream networks people expect. Yet a great deal of water may still be moving through the landscape, just beneath sight. The region can seem quiet at the surface, while an active drainage world exists below. Flooded caves can preserve layered water bodies in which freshwater, brackish water, and seawater interact in complex ways. These layers do not always blend into one uniform body of water. Instead, they may remain partly separated because of differences in density, salinity, and circulation. This gives some flooded cave systems a hidden structure that is almost like a stacked water column inside the earth. Anchialine caves are often oxygen-poor because they have no photosynthesis and only limited water circulation. In surface waters, oxygen is often renewed through sunlight-driven life and active mixing. But in these enclosed cave systems, those refreshing processes are weaker or absent. That creates a more demanding environment where only certain forms of life can thrive. Cave animals in oxygen-poor anchialine systems often evolve traits that reduce oxygen demand. In simple terms, they may survive by living more efficiently, moving more carefully, or developing bodies and behaviors suited to low oxygen conditions. These are not dramatic adaptations in the everyday sense, but quiet physiological adjustments that make survival possible in a place where oxygen is scarce. Cave life often succeeds through efficiency rather than speed. Blue holes can act as long-term environmental archives, including records of hurricane passage preserved in sediments. Layer by layer, material settles and can store evidence of past storm activity. Scientists can study those sediments much like pages in a natural history book. A blue hole is therefore not just a dark opening in water, but also a quiet recorder of past environmental events. Cave microclimate matters scientifically because stable temperature and humidity can preserve art, bones, and artifacts for very long periods. In many caves, the air changes more slowly than it does on the surface, and that stability can protect delicate material from rapid decay. It is one reason caves are so valuable as archives of both natural and human history. The calmness of cave conditions can preserve what open landscapes quickly destroy. Deep cave galleries are often better preserved than more open rock shelters because they are buffered from external climate changes. Wind, rain, sunlight, and rapid seasonal swings have less direct effect deep inside. That buffering makes the deeper interior a gentler place for preserving ancient traces. In many cases, the farther inward a chamber lies, the more protected it has been from the restless conditions outside. Cave air is not always harmless, because some caves with bat guano can expose people to fungal spores. This is an important reminder that caves are natural environments, not sealed museums. Dust or disturbance in certain places can release microscopic particles into the air. So although caves often seem still and quiet, some contain hidden health risks that are easy to overlook. Histoplasmosis is caused by a fungus called histoplasma. The disease is not caused by the cave itself, but by a living organism that can be associated with certain cave conditions, especially where droppings have accumulated. Knowing the fungal cause helps researchers and health workers understand how exposure happens and how it can be prevented. Even a dark underground setting can have very specific biological hazards. Activities that disturb soil or deposits containing bird or bat droppings can increase the risk of histoplasmosis. When these materials are stirred up, tiny fungal spores may become airborne and easier to inhale. The danger is often not from simply standing quietly in a place, but from disruption that lifts fine particles into the air. That is why excavation, sweeping, climbing through dusty areas, or heavy movement can matter. Working in caves is specifically listed as a risk setting for histoplasma exposure in places where the fungus is present. This shows that cave-related fungal exposure is recognized in public health guidance, not just mentioned casually. Scientists, guides, workers, and explorers all need to think about environmental safety as well as physical terrain. A cave can be geologically stable and still present a biological risk. Bat-inhabited caves are high-risk settings for exposure because guano can become a source of airborne spores when disturbed. Bat colonies themselves are ecologically important, but where droppings accumulate over time, the surrounding material can create a health concern. The risk is connected to the cave environment shaped by the colony, not to some simple fear of bats. It is another example of caves being active ecosystems with consequences for human health. A documented family exposure linked to Venado Caves in Costa Rica in 2024 showed how recreational cave visits can trigger histoplasmosis outbreaks. This is useful because it turns an abstract warning into a real-world example. People do not need to be full-time cave workers to face exposure. Even a tourism setting can become risky if environmental conditions allow spores to be stirred into the air. In that outbreak report, all 12 people who toured the cave developed symptoms, while a family member who did not enter the cave did not. That contrast made the likely source of exposure especially clear. It showed a strong link between entering the cave and becoming ill. Cases like this help public health researchers understand how cave exposures happen in practical, real-life situations. Cave conditions such as dryness can influence how easily fungal spores become airborne. In a drier setting, material may break apart and lift into the air more readily than in a damp, settled environment. So cave health risk is not only about what is present, but also about the physical conditions that control how easily it spreads. The smallest details of cave atmosphere can matter. Cave ice in rock caves is not the same as the constantly changing ice architecture found inside glaciers. A rock ice cave is built in stone and holds ice under suitable conditions, while a glacier cave is a tunnel within moving ice itself. That difference affects how the space changes over time. One is a cave in rock with frozen features, and the other is a frozen cave whose walls are part of the glacier body. Glacier ice caves are especially dynamic because glaciers are moving bodies of ice. Their ceilings, walls, and passages can shift, melt, reform, or collapse as the glacier moves and seasonal meltwater changes. This makes them beautiful but temporary and unstable compared with many rock caves. They are caves in motion, shaped by an environment that never truly stands still. Coastal and marine caves can experience tidal influence even if they appear isolated from the sea at the surface. Water levels and conditions inside them may still respond to the ocean through hidden connections in porous rock or submerged passages. So the sea can affect a cave without making that connection obvious to the eye. The cave may seem separate, while still quietly breathing with the tide. Landlocked ankyline caves are especially interesting because they combine underground confinement with marine influence. They seem cut off from the sea when viewed from above, yet seawater processes still help shape their chemistry and ecology. This creates a very unusual environment. They are underground systems that are both enclosed and ocean-connected at the same time. Cave hydrology can be vertically organized, with different water layers controlling where different organisms can survive. In subsystems, life may be arranged according to depth because oxygen, salinity, and other conditions change from one layer to another. That means the cave is not just horizontally complex, but also vertically structured. A few meters of depth can create a completely different living zone. Because cave waters often recharge drinking water systems, protecting cave environments can directly help protect human water supplies. This makes cave conservation more than a matter of preserving scenery or rare formations. It also becomes a public health and infrastructure issue. What happens underground can affect the quality of water that later reaches homes and communities. Underground pools associated with cave systems can replenish groundwater used by both people and terrestrial wildlife. These waters are part of broader hydrologic cycles, not isolated hidden pockets with no outside significance. They can feed aquifers, sustain springs, and support ecosystems beyond the cave itself. Water held underground often serves life far beyond the cave chamber where it rests. Cave microclimates can be so stable that even the heat and moisture from visitors can become a management concern at sensitive sites. Human bodies give off warmth, water vapor, and carbon dioxide, and in delicate caves, those small inputs can gradually change local conditions. A space that seems large to people can still be sensitive to repeated human presence. This is why cave management sometimes limits access, even when visitors behave carefully. The preserved atmosphere of a cave is one reason archaeological and paleontological materials are often better protected there than in open landscapes. In caves, remains are often sheltered from direct sunlight, heavy rain, wind erosion, and rapid temperature swings. That protection can allow fragile materials to survive much longer. Caves do not preserve everything, but they often preserve far more than the surface does. The way a cave breathes, stores humidity, and exchanges air can matter as much for preservation as the rock itself. A cave is not just a hollow chamber with still air. It can have subtle airflow patterns, moisture balance, and seasonal exchanges with the outside environment. These details help determine whether delicate materials remain stable or gradually deteriorate. Preservation depends on atmosphere as well as stone. Animals that live only in caves are called troglobites. This term describes species that are deeply specialized for cave life and usually cannot survive well outside that dark environment. They are not occasional cave visitors, but true cave dwellers. Their existence shows that some life forms become so adapted to underground conditions that the cave becomes their entire world. Many troglobites have little or no body pigment because they live in complete darkness. Color often matters less when there is no sunlight and no need for visual camouflage or display. Over long periods, pigmentation can be reduced or lost because it is no longer especially useful. Their pale appearance is one of the most familiar visual signs of cave adaptation. Reduced eyes or complete eye loss are common among cave specialists. In total darkness, vision offers little advantage, so natural selection may favor energy savings or other sensory improvements instead. Over evolutionary time, eyes can shrink or disappear in some cave lineages. This is one of the clearest examples of how an environment can reshape anatomy. Cave animals often develop sensory systems that do not depend heavily on vision. They may rely more on touch, chemical sensing, water movement, vibration, or other non-visual cues. In darkness, information still exists, but it arrives through different channels. Cave life teaches that sensing the world does not require light. In oxygen-poor, ankyline caves, some species evolve behavioral, physiological, or anatomical strategies that lower oxygen demand. They may move less, use energy more slowly, or possess internal features that help them function in low oxygen conditions. These are quiet, but powerful adaptations. Survival in such caves depends not on strength alone, but on efficiency and fine-tuned biological balance. Cave ecosystems usually run on scarce energy, which is one reason cave specialists often show efficient, slow-paced lifestyles. There is usually less food available underground than at the surface, especially in dark zones with no photosynthesis. Because resources are limited, life must make the most of what little enters the system. Cave ecosystems often reward patience, thrift, and low energy use. Wind cave includes tiny, cave-adapted animals, such as springtails and mites in its far reaches. These are small creatures, easy to overlook, yet they are important parts of underground biodiversity. Their presence shows that a cave does not need large animals to be ecologically rich. Even a seemingly empty cave can host a hidden community of minute specialists. Some cave salamanders can spend their entire lives underground in cave environments. That means the cave is not just a shelter or temporary refuge, but a complete, lifelong habitat. These animals are shaped by the darkness, humidity, and stable conditions of that world. Their full life story unfolds without needing the surface at all. Cave species are often highly localized, meaning a single cave or cave network may contain animals found nowhere else on Earth. That kind of restricted range makes these species both scientifically fascinating and environmentally vulnerable. If something harms that one cave system, the species may have nowhere else to go. Endemism gives caves great biological value, but also great fragility. Endemism is especially strong in ankyline cave fauna, where isolated cave waters drive the evolution of distinct species. Because populations can remain separated for long periods in these unusual submerged systems, they may evolve in their own directions. Over time, that isolation can produce animals unique to a very small place. The hidden nature of the habitat can encourage hidden branches of evolution. Marine and ankyline cave animals often resemble deep-sea organisms in their sensory and oxygen-related adaptations. Although the settings are different, both environments can be dark, quiet, and low in easily available energy. That leads to some similar evolutionary pressures. It is a reminder that very different parts of the planet can shape life in comparable ways when the conditions overlap. Cave bats are ecologically important far beyond caves because they pollinate plants, disperse seeds, and consume insects. So even though caves may be their roosting or resting places, their role extends widely into surrounding ecosystems. They carry ecological influence out into forests, fields, and night skies. A cave bat colony can matter to the health of landscapes far beyond the cave entrance. Some individual bats can eat hundreds of insects in a single night. That gives bats an important role in controlling insect populations and supporting ecological balance. Their feeding activity is quiet and often unseen by most people, yet it has real consequences. A cave that shelters bats may therefore support natural pest control on a much broader scale. Many national parks protect caves that serve as bat maternity roosts or winter hibernation sites. These caves are not important only because they are geologically interesting. They are also seasonal homes tied to critical phases of bat life, including raising young or surviving cold months. Protecting the cave means protecting a key part of the bat's yearly cycle. White nose syndrome affects hibernating bats in caves and mines. The disease has become one of the most serious threats to bat populations in many areas. Hibernation makes bats especially vulnerable because the illness interferes with the fragile energy balance they need to survive winter. A disease inside caves can therefore reshape entire regional bat populations. The disease is caused by the fungus Pseudogymnoscus destructans. Identifying the specific fungal cause is important because it helps scientists track, study, and respond to the disease. It also shows once again that caves are places where microscopic life can have enormous ecological effects. A tiny organism can alter the future of entire bat colonies. White nose syndrome was first documented in New York during the winter of 2006 to 2007. From that point forward, it became a major concern for wildlife scientists, conservation agencies, and park managers. Knowing when the disease first appeared helps researchers trace its spread and understand its timeline. Even recent history can become very important in cave conservation. Since its discovery, white nose syndrome has killed millions of bats. That scale of loss is one reason the disease is treated as a major wildlife crisis. Bats reproduce slowly compared with how quickly such losses can occur, so recovery can be difficult. A problem that begins quietly in caves can have very large consequences across whole ecosystems. At sites affected by white nose syndrome, tricolored bat winter colonies have declined by roughly 90 to 100%. Those numbers are stark because they describe not small reductions, but near total collapses in some places. This shows how devastating the disease can be for particular species and colonies. a once active winter roost can become almost empty. The northern long-eared bat faces several major threats, including white nose syndrome, wind-related mortality, climate change effects, and habitat loss. This means the species is under pressure from more than one direction at once. Disease alone would be serious, but additional stresses make recovery even harder. Cave conservation often has to be understood in the wider context of landscape-level change. Cave conservation often includes seasonal restrictions because disturbing hibernating bats can make it harder for them to survive the winter. When bats are in hibernation, they depend on limited stored energy to last until warmer conditions return. If they are awakened too often, even briefly, they burn through that energy more quickly. That means a single human visit at the wrong time can matter more than it seems, especially in caves that serve as important winter shelters. The Ozark cavefish is one of the best-known cave fishes in the United States. It has become an important example of how life can adapt to a permanently dark underground world. Cavefish capture people's attention because they show, in a very visible way, how isolation and darkness can shape a species over time. They are not just unusual fish. They are living evidence of evolutionary adjustment to cave conditions. Threats to the Ozark cavefish include water pollution, declining bat populations, cave disturbance, specimen collection, and changing water tables. That long list shows how fragile a cave species can be when it depends on such a narrow and specialized habitat. It does not take only one dramatic event to put pressure on it. Instead, many smaller problems can combine and make survival harder, especially when the species has so few places to live. The Ozark cavefish depends on underground pools that are part of the same groundwater systems people use. This means its survival is tied directly to the quality and stability of hidden water resources that also matter to human communities. In a way, the fish and the people around it are connected through the same underground water. Protecting the fish, therefore, also means protecting a broader groundwater environment. Mammoth Cave National Park is noted for having a high diversity of both terrestrial and aquatic cave-adapted creatures. That means its biological importance is not limited to one kind of habitat underground. It includes dry passages, wet passages, pools, streams, and the many different niches those places create. The cave system is not just long. It is also ecologically rich in several different directions at once. 3 endangered species specifically highlighted at Mammoth Cave are the Kentucky cave shrimp, the Indiana bat, and the gray bat. These species represent very different parts of cave life, from aquatic invertebrates to flying mammals. Their presence helps show how broad cave biodiversity can be. A single cave region can support creatures that move through water, cling to dark walls, or leave the cave each night to feed in the open air. Cave shrimp are a reminder that cave biodiversity is not limited to bats and insects, because some cave life exists entirely in underground water. These hidden aquatic animals broaden the way people think about cave ecosystems. A cave is not only walls, ceilings, and dry chambers. It can also be an underwater habitat full of delicate, highly specialized life. Cave species often become conservation priorities because they combine tiny geographic ranges with very specific habitat requirements. When an organism lives only in one cave, or one small cave network, its whole future may depend on conditions staying stable in that one place. It cannot easily move somewhere else if things go wrong. That makes many cave species especially vulnerable and especially important to protect. Disturbing the surface above a cave can affect cave animals indirectly through changes in water quality and water level. This is one of the clearest examples of how underground ecosystems depend on what happens above ground. A person may never enter the cave and still influence the life inside it through land use, runoff, or changes to drainage. The cave may be hidden, but it is not separate from the landscape above it. Bat declines can ripple through cave systems because guano is an important energy source for some cave food webs. In many caves, nutrients are limited, so bat droppings provide a major input of organic material that supports other living things. When bat numbers fall, that food source can shrink as well. So the decline of one animal group can affect a whole chain of cave life beneath it. Caves can hold both terrestrial communities on dry surfaces and aquatic communities in underground streams and pools. This means one cave system may contain several different worlds within it: dry rock, damp sediment, flowing water, and still pools can each support different organisms. A cave can therefore be a mosaic of habitats rather than one single ecological setting. Ankyline cave species often live in darkness, low oxygen, and chemically layered water all at once. That combination makes their environment especially demanding. These organisms must cope not only with the absence of light, but also with water that may be stratified and poor in oxygen. Their existence shows how life can persist in conditions that seem severe and highly unusual by surface standards. Cave fauna can be evolutionarily informative because isolation underground often exaggerates adaptation. When a population remains cut off in darkness over long periods, changes in body form, behavior, and physiology can become especially pronounced. Scientists value these animals because they make evolutionary processes easier to see. Caves can reveal what happens when life is pushed into a very narrow set of environmental rules. Some cave organisms survive by enhancing non-visual sensing for food or predator detection. In darkness, vision becomes less useful, so other senses can take on a larger role. Touch, chemical cues, current changes, or vibration can become the main ways an animal understands its surroundings. This does not mean cave life is deprived of information. It means the information is gathered differently. The absence of light removes photosynthesis from many cave environments, so outside organic input becomes critically important. In most surface ecosystems, sunlight powers plant growth, which then supports other forms of life. But deep inside caves, that energy source disappears. As a result, cave ecosystems often depend on material brought in from outside, such as plant debris, animal droppings, or nutrients carried by water. Bat caves can be essential seasonal habitat rather than year-round living space, depending on the bat species. Some bats may use a cave for hibernation, while others use it mainly for raising young during warmer months. This means the same cave can play very different roles at different times of year. Its importance is tied not only to location, but also to season and life stage. Caves and old mines are both used by some bat species, but natural cave systems remain especially important in many protected areas. Artificial spaces can sometimes substitute in part, but they do not fully replace the ecological value of natural caves. Natural systems often provide the long-term environmental conditions that cave-adapted or cave-dependent species need. In conservation, natural roosting environments still matter deeply. Cave ecology often depends on stability, which is why even small environmental changes can have large effects underground. A slight shift in temperature, humidity, airflow, or water chemistry can matter more in a cave than it would in a more variable surface environment. That is partly because cave organisms are often adapted to narrow conditions. The stillness that helps caves function also makes them sensitive. Some cave environments are so nutrient poor that survival there requires extremely specialized life histories. Organisms may grow slowly, reproduce carefully, conserve energy, and make use of rare food inputs whenever they arrive. These are not places of abundance. They are places where life survives on careful balance and long-term efficiency. Marine cave research has shown that coastal caves can host endemic fauna with deep evolutionary significance. That means some of the animals found there are unique to those habitats and can reveal long histories of isolation and adaptation. Marine caves are therefore valuable not only as unusual environments, but also as windows into evolution. They preserve lineages and biological stories that may exist nowhere else. The strange appearance of many cave animals is largely a predictable response to darkness, isolation, and limited food. Their pale bodies, reduced eyes, and sensory modifications are not random oddities. They are repeated outcomes of similar environmental pressures acting again and again. Caves make evolution visible in a very concentrated and understandable way. Conservationists sometimes focus on cave entrances and surrounding forests because what happens outside can determine what survives inside. The entrance can control airflow, moisture, and animal movement, while nearby forest can affect water quality, shade, and food relationships. This means protecting the cave interior alone is often not enough. The outer landscape is part of the cave system in practice. Even when cave species are tiny or hidden, they can indicate the health of underground water systems. Small invertebrates, fish, or other cave specialists often respond quickly to changes in water quality and habitat stability. Because of that, they can serve as biological warning signs. Their presence or decline can tell scientists a great deal about the condition of the unseen environment around them. Some cave animals live their entire life cycle underground and never need surface daylight at all. They hatch, feed, reproduce, and die within a world of darkness, stable humidity, and limited energy. For these species, the cave is not an extension of life at the surface. It is the whole setting in which life takes place. Cave-adapted life is found in both freshwater caves and saline coastal caves, showing that darkness-driven evolution happens in very different chemistries. The water may be fresh in one place and salty in another, yet similar pressures such as low light, limited food, and isolation can still shape organisms in related ways. This makes cave biology especially powerful for comparison. It shows that some adaptations arise not from one specific chemistry, but from the broader logic of life in darkness. The most isolated cave species are often the hardest to protect because their populations may exist in only a handful of accessible passages or pools. If those few places are damaged, there may be no backup population elsewhere. This creates a conservation problem of scale. A species can be biologically remarkable and yet survive in only a tiny hidden space. Cave biodiversity is one reason caves are treated as ecosystems and not merely as empty geological spaces. Rock, water, airflow, microbes, invertebrates, fish, bats, and nutrients all interact there. The cave is not just a hollow void left by geology. It is a functioning environment with relationships, dependencies, and ecological processes of its own. Park managers sometimes treat cave protection and prairie, forest, or watershed protection as one connected task because the ecosystems above and below ground are linked. A cave may depend on the health of the vegetation above it, the cleanliness of runoff, the behavior of streams, and the presence of animals that move between surface and subsurface. In practice, underground conservation often becomes landscape conservation. Cave research can reveal how animals adapt when light disappears, oxygen drops, and food becomes irregular. These are some of the simplest and strongest environmental filters imaginable. By studying the organisms that survive under them, scientists learn how flexible life can be. Caves become natural experiments in persistence under constraint. Caves are among the clearest places on Earth to see evolution acting on isolation, energy scarcity, and sensory trade-offs. Many cave species show repeated themes: less emphasis on eyes and pigment, more emphasis on alternative senses and efficient energy use. These patterns do not happen because caves are magical, but because caves apply similar pressures over very long times. That makes them especially useful for understanding how environments shape life. Caves have been used by humans for far longer than recorded history, including for shelter, ritual, mining, and art. This long relationship shows that caves are not only natural places, but also cultural ones. People have entered them for practical reasons, spiritual reasons, and creative reasons over many thousands of years. A cave can therefore preserve both geological time and human time together. Mammoth Cave preserves evidence that Native Americans explored and mined parts of the system from about 5,000 years ago until nearly 2,000 years ago. That long span of use shows that ancient people knew these underground spaces well and returned to them over many generations. Their relationship with the cave was not brief or accidental. It was sustained, deliberate, and meaningful. Prehistoric people entered Mammoth Cave largely to obtain minerals such as gypsum, selenite, mirabilite, and epsomite. This tells us they were not wandering underground without purpose. They were going in to gather specific materials that had value to them. The cave was a resource landscape, and its minerals were important enough to justify the difficulty of underground travel. Archaeological finds from Mammoth Cave include cane reed torches, mussel shells, gourd bowls, and woven sandals. These objects bring ancient cave use into focus because they are practical, ordinary, and deeply human. They suggest movement, work, light-making, carrying, and daily problem-solving inside the cave. A simple torch or sandal can make prehistoric cave exploration feel much more real. Human remains have been found not only near cave entrances, but also deep inside Mammoth Cave. That fact shows that ancient people did not always stop at the threshold. They moved far into the darkness, whether for ritual, exploration, work, or other purposes that are not always easy to reconstruct. The cave interior was part of human activity, not merely a distant background. Prehistoric material from Mammoth Cave also includes digging sticks, shell scrapers, hammerstones, cordage, textile fragments, climbing poles, and preserved paleofeces. This wide range of items offers an unusually direct look into ancient underground activity. It shows tools, movement, diet, bodily presence, and material culture all preserved together. Few places provide such intimate and varied evidence of prehistoric life in action. The preservation of these materials is one reason Mammoth Cave is important archaeologically as well as geologically. The cave did not only form an impressive underground landscape, it also protected traces of human use that would likely have disappeared elsewhere. Because of that, the cave serves two forms of science at once: the study of Earth processes and the study of ancient people. Early 19th century settlers rediscovered Mammoth Cave partly as a source of saltpeter rather than as a tourist attraction. This is a useful reminder that famous caves did not always begin as scenic destinations. In that period, the cave was valued for practical extraction. Its industrial usefulness came before its modern identity as a place of guided exploration and public wonder. Around 400,000 pounds of saltpeter were removed from Mammoth Cave and turned into gunpowder for the War of 1812. That enormous quantity shows how seriously the cave was used as a resource during a time of conflict. The cave was not just visited. It was worked on a large scale to support war-related production. This gives Mammoth Cave an industrial and political history as well as a natural one. Saltpeter production at Mammoth Cave depended on nitrate-rich cave earth, created in part by long accumulations of bat guano. In this way, a biological process in the cave indirectly supported a major industrial process later on. Bat colonies contributed to the development of cave deposits that humans would eventually exploit. It is a striking example of natural history feeding into human history. The cave's calcium nitrate was processed with water, vats, and piping before being converted into saltpeter. So the cave was not only mined, it was also part of a system of underground industrial handling and transformation. Materials had to be collected, moved, washed, and processed with considerable effort. This turns the cave from a natural chamber into a kind of historical workplace. Hollowed Tudor poplar logs were used in Mammoth Cave's early industrial piping system. That detail helps make the historical process more concrete. Workers were not using modern metal infrastructure, but resourceful wooden engineering shaped from available materials. The cave's industrial past therefore reflects both natural resources underground and practical craftsmanship above ground. Much of the labor for Mammoth Cave's saltpeter mining was done by enslaved African American men working long hours in poor conditions. This is a deeply important part of the cave's history. The cave's industrial success and early fame are connected to forced labor and human suffering. Understanding the cave fully means remembering not only its geology and beauty, but also the people whose labor was exploited there. After the War of 1812, Mammoth Cave shifted from industrial extraction to tourism and guided exploration. This marks a major change in how people valued the cave. What had been treated largely as a resource site became a place of curiosity, travel, and scientific interest. The same underground system took on a very different public meaning. Enslaved and formerly enslaved black guides were central to Mammoth Cave's early fame and route development. They were not minor figures standing at the edge of the story. They helped shape the public understanding of the cave and played key roles in exploration and guiding. Much of the cave's early reputation was built through their knowledge and labor. Stephen Bishop is remembered as one of the most important Burley Mammoth Cave explorers and guides. His name stands out because he contributed significantly to the mapping, interpretation, and public understanding of the cave. He is one of the clearest examples of how individual human knowledge helped reveal the underground world to others. In the history of cave exploration, some guides were also major discoverers. Cave tourism in the 19th century was fueled in part by curiosity about preserved artifacts and human remains found underground. Visitors were drawn not only by the scale of the cave, but also by the sense that it contained deep traces of human antiquity. The cave seemed to offer both natural wonder and historical mystery. Tourism often grows where science, imagination, and preserved evidence meet. Mammoth Cave's archaeological record suggests that prehistoric people first entered through what is now called the historic entrance. That entrance is therefore more than a modern access point. It may also be the path through which ancient people first moved from surface life into the underground environment. One opening in the rock can connect thousands of years of human passage. Cueva de las Manos in Argentina is famous for stenciled human hands painted on cave walls. These hand images feel immediate because they preserve the shape of real human presence in a simple and powerful way. They do not require complicated interpretation to be moving. A hand on stone is one of the most direct ways the past can seem close. The same cave also includes hunting scenes and depictions of animals such as guanacos. This adds another layer to the meaning of the site. It is not only a place of hand images, but also a place of storytelling, observation, and symbolic representation of life and movement. The cave walls hold both human marks and scenes from the wider world those people knew. The art at Cueva de las Manos dates back thousands of years, with major phases described between about 13,000 and 9,500 years ago. That time depth makes the site extraordinarily important because it places the paintings within a very early chapter of human life in South America. These images are not recent folk markings or later historical additions. They belong to a deep prehistoric world, and that age helps explain why the cave is treated as one of the great cultural records of early human expression. Archaeologists regard the Rio Pinturas cave complex as one of the most important records of early hunter-gatherer groups in South America. This importance comes not only from the visual power of the paintings, but also from what they reveal about people who moved, hunted, organized, and expressed meaning in that region long ago. The cave complex preserves a human story that might otherwise have faded almost completely. In that sense, it is not just a painted place, but a record of lifeways. The decorated cave of Pont d'Arc, that are known as Chauvet Cave, contains some of the earliest known figurative drawings in the world. That matters because figurative art shows recognizable animals and forms, not just abstract marks or simple signs. It demonstrates that humans were already able to observe closely, imagine clearly, and turn those observations into powerful visual representations. Chauvet is therefore not just an old cave. It is one of the great surviving places where very early human imagination still speaks. Chauvet's art has been carbon dated to as early as the Aurignacian period, roughly 30, 000 to 32, 000 years before present. Those dates place the cave among the oldest major sites of figurative image-making known anywhere. When people hear numbers like that, it becomes easier to understand why the cave changed ideas about early art. It showed that complex visual culture was already present at a very remote stage of human history. The caves of the Swabian Jura in Germany are important because they yielded some of the oldest known figurative art and the oldest known musical instruments. This makes the site remarkable in two directions at once. It preserves evidence of both visual creativity and sound making in very early human communities. Together, those finds suggest that imagination, symbolism, and music were already deeply rooted in human life during the Ice Age. Finds from the Swabian Jura caves include carved figures of cave lions, mammoths, horses, and bovids. These figures show that early artists were paying close attention to the animals around them and were capable of representing them with care and intention. The carvings are small, but their significance is enormous. They show a mind interested not only in survival, but also in image, form, and representation. The Swabian Jura cave discoveries date to a period when modern humans had only recently arrived in Europe during the last Ice Age. That timing is important because it links the caves to an early phase of human expansion and cultural development in the region. The artworks and instruments found there suggest that symbolic behavior was already flourishing very early in that process. These caves therefore help illuminate not just art history, but human prehistory more broadly. Altamira and the other decorated caves of northern Spain are renowned because their deep galleries helped preserve Paleolithic art from outside climatic influence. The deeper parts of a cave are often more stable than exposed shelters or open landscapes, and that stability can protect paintings over immense spans of time. In the case of Altamira, the cave's own structure became part of the reason the art survived. The underground setting acted almost like a natural shield. UNESCO describes the Altamira cave group as representing the apogee of Paleolithic cave art across Europe. In simple terms, that means the site is regarded as one of the highest achievements of prehistoric cave painting on the continent. It stands as a peak example of technical skill, artistic expression, and preservation. Altamira is not merely important because it is old. It is also important because of the exceptional quality of what survives there. The broader Altamira World Heritage listing includes 17 decorated caves in northern Spain. That larger grouping matters because it shows that the artistic tradition was not limited to one isolated chamber. Instead, it reflects a regional landscape of decorated cave sites. Looking at the caves together provides a fuller picture of prehistoric symbolic life than any one cave alone could offer. Naj Tunish in Guatemala was a ceremonial cave of major significance to the ancient Maya. This means the cave was not simply a place people happened to enter, but a site with ritual and spiritual importance. For the Maya, caves could be powerful symbolic spaces linked to the sacred world, ancestry, and the underworld. Naj Tunish stands out as one of the clearest examples of this ceremonial role. The name Naj Tunish means stone house in the Mayan Quiché language. The name itself reflects the sense that caves were understood not just as holes in the ground, but as meaningful places with identity and presence. A name like Stone House gives the cave a feeling of structure and importance. It suggests that the underground space was perceived almost as a place of dwelling or sacred enclosure. Naj Tunish contains pre-Hispanic rock art and was used as a center of worship rather than simply as a shelter. That distinction matters because it tells us the cave held symbolic and ceremonial value, not just practical value. People were going there for ritual purpose, for communication with the sacred, or for acts of devotion. The cave was a cultural and spiritual environment as much as a physical one. Cave art is not only European, because South American and Mesoamerican cave traditions also preserve major records of ancient symbolic life. This is an important corrective to the common habit of focusing only on the most famous European painted caves. Human artistic and ceremonial use of caves happened across different continents and cultural settings. The underground world has preserved creativity in many parts of the globe. Some archaeologists study cave art not only as decoration, but also as a way ancient people may have transmitted information across generations. In that view, cave images can be understood as part of social memory and knowledge sharing, not just visual expression. Paintings and markings may have helped preserve ideas about animals, hunting, ritual, or identity. Cave art can therefore be both beautiful and informative at the same time. Newer dating work continues to refine the ages of famous cave paintings, showing that cave archaeology remains an active scientific field. Even sites known for more than a century can still yield new results when dating methods improve. This means our understanding of cave art is not fixed once and for all. It continues to develop as science becomes more precise. Cave sites can preserve not only paintings, but also musical instruments, ornaments, tools, and ritual traces. That broader preservation makes caves unusually rich cultural archives. They can hold the visual, practical, and ceremonial sides of human life, all in one environment. A cave may therefore preserve a more complete human story than a single artifact or image ever could. Because caves can shield cultural remains from weather, they often contain unusually direct evidence of ancient behavior. On open ground, fragile traces are often erased by rain, sunlight, erosion, or later disturbance. Inside caves, some of those same traces may survive for extraordinary lengths of time. That is why caves often feel like places where the past remains more intact. Human history in caves ranges from mineral extraction and burial to art, ritual, tourism, and science. This wide range of uses helps show that caves are not tied to one single meaning. Different people in different eras have understood them as resources, sacred places, shelters, workplaces, laboratories, and destinations. A cave can change cultural role many times without changing location. Mammoth Cave achieved the title of World's Longest Known Cave after explorers connected it with the Flint Ridge system in 1972. That connection was a major turning point in cave science and exploration. It showed that what had seemed like separate underground worlds were actually parts of one much larger system. Sometimes the significance of a cave changes not because the cave changed, but because human mapping finally revealed a hidden connection. The national park around Mammoth Cave contains more than 400 caves in total, not just the one great system for which it is famous. This matters because it shows the region is not defined by a single underground feature. It is an entire cave-rich landscape with many openings, passages, and systems of different sizes and histories. Mammoth Cave National Park is therefore both one extraordinary cave and a broader world of caves around it. Mammoth Cave is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an International Biosphere Reserve. These designations show that the cave's value is recognized at a global level, not only as a national landmark. It is seen as important for natural heritage, science, and ecological meaning. Such recognition reflects the cave's exceptional significance beyond tourism alone. Wind Cave has 167 miles of known passages packed beneath only about 1.25 square miles of land. That density is astonishing because it means a very large amount of cave passage fits into a very small surface footprint. The underground complexity is compressed beneath a relatively limited area. It is one reason Wind Cave feels so remarkable to cave scientists, even without relying on giant chambers. Wind Cave is famous not for massive decorated rooms, but for dense maser-like complexity and rare boxwork. This gives it a very different character from caves known mainly for huge open spaces or spectacular dripstone. Wind Cave's appeal lies in its intricate internal patterning and geological uniqueness. It is a cave that impresses through structure and detail rather than sheer chamber size. Carlsbad Caverns National Park protects Carlsbad Cavern along with more than 120 other known caves. That makes the park a large cave landscape rather than a single famous show cave. The variety of caves within the area adds scientific value because different caves can preserve different stages, chemistries, and features. The park is a whole underground region, not one isolated wonder. Those caves formed over roughly the last 20 million years as sulfuric acid dissolved limestone in an ancient reef. This is one of the most unusual and important cave-forming stories known. Instead of relying mainly on mild carbonic acid groundwater from the surface, this cave region records a stronger acid process tied to deeper geologic chemistry. The result is a cave landscape shaped by an especially dramatic form of dissolution. Litugia became famous not only for its size, but also for its rare speleothems and unusual mineral chemistry. In other words, the cave is important not just because it is large, but because it preserves features that are scientifically and visually extraordinary. Its mineral environment has produced unusual formations and chemical evidence that help researchers understand cave processes in greater depth. Some caves are famous for dimensions, but Litugia is also famous for character. Lava Beds National Monument stands out because its cave richness comes from volcanism rather than dissolved limestone. This makes it a strong reminder that not all major cave landscapes are karst landscapes. At lava beds, underground spaces were created by flowing lava and later draining, not by long chemical removal of rock. The monument shows how different natural processes can still lead to a dense cave world. The monument's caves exist alongside Native American rock art sites and historic battlefields, making it a combined geological and cultural landscape. That combination gives the area a layered meaning. It is a place where volcanic history, human presence, artistic expression, and conflict all leave traces. Some cave regions are important not because they tell one story, but because they hold several at once. Bermuda's Walsingham cave systems are important examples of marine and ankyline caves shaped by sea level change. These caves help scientists understand how rising and falling seas can transform underground spaces through time. Their present form reflects not only cave processes, but also long-term coastal and marine history. They are useful places for seeing how caves respond to a changing ocean world. Some caves in Lanzarote, such as the La Corona lava tube, formed dry during the last ice age and were later flooded by rising seas. This means a single cave can pass through completely different environmental phases over time. What began as a dry volcanic passage later became part of a marine-influenced world. Such caves preserve a history of both fire and ocean in one place. Andros in the Bahamas is well known for marine caves and blue holes that appear as dark openings in submerged limestone. These features are striking from above, but their visual mystery is only part of their importance. They also reveal extensive underwater karst processes and hidden cave systems below the surface. The dark color seen from above hints at real depth and underground complexity. The Guadalupe Mountains cave region is unusual because it shows sulfuric acid cave formation on a large scale, rather than relying mainly on ordinary surface-derived dissolution. This makes the area especially important to geologists who study cave origin. It demonstrates that major cave systems can form through very different chemistries than the standard textbook model. In this region, deep processes played an unusually powerful role. The caves at Sequoia and Kings Canyon display long curtains, tall stalagmites, rimstone pools, helictites, and large shields in one park system. That range of formations makes the park an excellent example of how visually varied cave decoration can be. Instead of one dominant style of mineral growth, the caves there preserve many. They show that a single cave region can contain a whole gallery of different underground forms. Some cave systems are famous for length, some for age, some for decoration, and some for archaeological value. This is a useful way to think about cave significance, because no one measurement explains everything. One cave may be scientifically vital because it is ancient, another because it is rich in art, another because it is enormous, and another because of rare biology. Caves gain importance in many different ways. Mammoth Cave is a natural laboratory for studying several stages of Earth's evolutionary history, not just a tourist destination. Its size, geology, fossils, hydrology, archaeology, and biodiversity all make it scientifically rich. Researchers can learn about long-term landscape development, underground water systems, and ecological adaptation there. It is one of those places where public wonder and scientific value are equally strong. Wind Cave protects two different worlds at once: a vast underground cave system and a biologically rich prairie above it. This pairing is important because it shows how caves can be linked to healthy surface ecosystems. The cave and the prairie are not separate stories. They are part of one protected landscape, where what happens above and below ground both matter. Some cave systems gain scientific importance precisely because their rarity lies in preservation rather than size. A cave does not have to be the biggest to be one of the most valuable. If it preserves ancient art, unusual chemistry, or a fragile environmental record in exceptional condition, it may become globally important for that reason alone. In science, preservation can matter as much as scale. Cueva de las Manos is famous less for cave size than for the concentration and quality of its paintings. The cave itself is not celebrated because it is among the longest or deepest. Instead, its importance comes from what human beings left on its walls. This reminds us that cave significance can lie in culture just as strongly as in geology. Chauvet Cave is famous less for scale than for the antiquity and preservation of its figurative art. Its global importance comes from what it contains and how old that material is, not from being one of the physically largest caves. That makes it a strong example of how cultural value can outweigh sheer underground dimensions. A modest chamber can become one of the world's great sights if what survives there is extraordinary. The Swabian Jura caves are a serial site, meaning several different caves together make up the full archaeological significance. This is important because the story is spread across multiple locations rather than contained in one single place. Each cave contributes part of the evidence, and together they form a larger prehistoric picture. Sometimes a cultural landscape is best understood as a network, not an isolated point. Altamira's wider heritage value now includes multiple caves because Paleolithic art in northern Spain is best understood as a regional cave complex. Looking at the caves together reveals a broader tradition of underground painting and symbolic practice. It shifts the focus from one masterpiece to a cultural zone. This larger view helps archaeologists understand continuity, variation, and regional context. Maj Tunish is unusual because its significance centers on Maya ritual and inscriptional evidence rather than Ice Age animal painting. This gives it a very different cultural personality from many famous European caves. It belongs to another historical world, another symbolic system, and another relationship between people and underground space. Cave heritage is diverse because human cultures used caves in very different ways. Cave fame can grow through new mapping, and Mammoth Cave's total known length has continued increasing as explorers add newly surveyed passages. This means that even a cave already famous as the world's longest can still become larger in human knowledge. The underground system may remain physically the same, but our understanding of it keeps expanding. A cave's scientific stature can therefore continue to grow long after its fame begins. Cave fame can also grow through new dating, because even very well-known painted caves can still yield revised ages when scientific methods improve. A cave may have been famous for generations, and yet researchers may later discover that certain images or materials are older or younger than once believed. That means the meaning of the cave can deepen with time instead of staying fixed. Even in places already celebrated around the world, the timeline can still become clearer, richer, and more surprising. Cave fame can also grow through new mapping because a cave system may become more important as explorers document new chambers, hidden links, or additional miles of passage. Sometimes the cave itself has not changed at all, but human understanding of it has expanded. A map is not just a drawing. It is a record of what has been discovered so far, and that record can continue to grow. Some cave sites are best known for what they reveal about ancient humans, while others are best known for what they reveal about ancient seas, underground aquifers, or microbial life. This is one of the quiet beauties of cave science. Different caves become famous for different reasons. One may preserve paintings, another climate records, another unusual chemistry, and another rare biological adaptation. Root and Kennecott Glacier caves in Alaska show how ice cave features can be tied to active glacier margins rather than to stable rock chambers. These are not caves in unchanging stone, but caves shaped within moving ice at the edges of living glaciers. Their form depends on meltwater, ice flow, and seasonal change. They are reminders that some caves belong to very dynamic worlds. Cave systems can be nationally significant, even when visitors see only a tiny fraction of the mapped passages. What people experience on a tour may be only a small sample of a much larger underground network. Most of the cave may remain beyond ordinary access, used only for research, exploration, or protection. A public pathway can therefore represent only the visible edge of a much greater hidden system. Some of the world's great caves are famous for the near absence of light and life, while others are famous because life and culture flourished inside them. This contrast is part of what makes caves so fascinating. One cave may feel almost empty except for rock, water, and darkness. Another may preserve paintings, ritual traces, fossils, microbes, bats, or entire ecological communities. Cave rankings can change as exploration continues, which means records such as longest known cave or deepest known system depend on mapping, not just on existence. A cave may always have been there, but until humans measure it carefully, its place in the global record remains uncertain. This gives cave science a humble quality. The underground world is often larger or more complex than our current lists suggest. Some caves, like Wind Cave, are impressive because enormous complexity is compressed into a very small surface footprint. The wonder there is not simply how far the cave extends across the land, but how densely packed the passage network is beneath a limited area. It is like finding an entire hidden maze folded tightly under one patch of ground. That kind of concentrated complexity gives the cave a very distinctive character. Other caves, like Carlsbad Cavern, are impressive because unusual chemistry created huge accessible chambers that changed how the public imagined caves. For many people, places like Carlsbad helped expand the idea of what a cave could be. Instead of just narrow tunnels or dark cracks, caves could also be grand spaces shaped by powerful underground processes. Sometimes one cave changes the public imagination of all caves. Cave sites can receive international recognition for natural values, cultural values, or both, depending on what they preserve. A cave may be honored because it contains rare geology, because it protects ancient art, or because it combines human and natural importance in one place. This wide range of recognition reflects the fact that caves are not only landforms. They are also archives of life, history, and environmental process. A cave's significance is often a combination of geology, hydrology, ecology, and human history rather than one single feature. That is why caves are so hard to summarize in a simple sentence. One system may matter because of its water flow, its species, its paintings, its fossils, and its mineral chemistry all at once. The deeper people study caves, the more layered their importance tends to become. Some famous caves are open to visitors, while others are tightly controlled or even closed in order to protect fragile interiors. This difference reflects how sensitive many caves can be. Public access can be valuable for education and appreciation, but too much disturbance can damage art, formations, microclimate, or wildlife. In cave management, protection sometimes means restraint. Cave preservation can depend on a simple accident of history, such as Chauvet Cave being sealed by rockfall for thousands of years. That kind of natural closure can protect a cave more effectively than any human planning could have done. Because the cave remained shut off, the art and internal conditions were shielded from weather, traffic, and repeated disturbance. Sometimes the reason something survives is that geology quietly closed the door. Cave tourism has historically shifted some caves from industrial or local use into national symbols and scientific landmarks. A cave that once served as a mine, resource site, or local curiosity can later become a protected place of broad cultural importance. Over time, public attention can transform how society values the same underground space. The cave remains, but the meaning attached to it changes. Famous caves often become anchor sites for broader cave protection programs because they help people understand the importance of whole karst regions. A well-known cave can draw attention to less famous caves nearby and to the groundwater, wildlife, and geology connected with them. In that way, one celebrated site can support protection far beyond its own walls. Fame can sometimes help conservation spread outward. Cave heritage can include paintings, musical instruments, fossils, mining remains, tour infrastructure, and living ecosystems, all in one place. Few environments combine so many kinds of significance. A single cave may preserve evidence of ancient art, industrial history, biological adaptation, and geological process side by side. This layered richness is part of why caves are so difficult to replace once damaged. Cave notoriety is not always ancient, because modern exploration can still transform how important a cave seems scientifically. New discoveries, new passages, and new data can suddenly elevate a cave's standing in the scientific world. A place that once seemed secondary can become central after careful exploration reveals something extraordinary. Cave importance is not frozen in the past. Some of the most scientifically important caves are those that preserve processes hard to observe anywhere else, such as sulfuric acid cave formation or ankyloline adaptation. These caves act like rare laboratories where unusual Earth processes can be studied directly. Their value does not come only from beauty or size, but from the way they reveal uncommon mechanisms clearly. They allow scientists to observe hidden natural stories in place. A cave can be world famous without being visually extravagant if it preserves a crucial archaeological or hydrological record. Not every important cave is full of giant chambers or brilliant mineral decoration. Some are valued because they store information no other site stores so well. Quiet caves, plain caves, and difficult caves can still be among the most meaningful. Underground places that seem silent and still often turn out to be some of the most information-rich environments on Earth. Beneath the calm surface, caves may preserve records of climate, water movement, biological adaptation, ancient art, mineral growth, and human activity. Their stillness is part of what helps them remember. What looks empty at first can hold an enormous amount of evidence. Cave conservation is often really a form of watershed conservation because pollutants entering sinkholes and fractures can spread through karst aquifers. In that sense, protecting a cave means protecting the water paths that feed and pass through it. The cave cannot be separated from the wider water system around it. A healthy cave often begins with a healthy landscape above. Protecting cave entrances alone is not enough if the land above the cave remains vulnerable to runoff, dumping, quarrying, or careless development. A cave entrance may look like the obvious place to focus attention, but many of the biggest threats begin elsewhere. Surface actions can send water, pollutants, and physical disturbance downward. The cave mouth is only one part of a much larger zone of influence. Bermuda's cave fauna face threats that include filling, quarrying, water pollution, dumping, and vandalism. This shows how many different kinds of harm can converge on cave ecosystems. Some threats are direct and physical, while others work through water quality or long-term habitat loss. Delicate underground life can be affected by activities that seem far removed from it. Cave art conservation often depends on limiting visitation because human presence can alter humidity, temperature, and carbon dioxide levels. A person entering a cave brings more than footsteps. Each visit adds warmth, moisture, breath, and subtle environmental change. In especially sensitive decorated caves, even these quiet human effects can matter over time. Controlled access to decorated caves is therefore a preservation strategy, not merely a tourism policy. Restricting entry is often done not to exclude people without reason, but to reduce cumulative change in fragile underground environments. The goal is to keep the cave as stable as possible for the long future. Sometimes the most caring way to share a cave is to limit how often people enter it. Bat protection is a major part of cave management because disease and disturbance can collapse winter colonies or disrupt maternity roosts. A cave may be geologically impressive, but it may also be a critical shelter for animals whose survival depends on stable underground conditions. Managers often have to think like both geologists and wildlife protectors. The cave is home as well as habitat. Cave tourism infrastructure itself can become historically significant, as seen in places where old mining works, paths, or tour facilities have become part of the cave's story. Over time, even the human additions to a cave can acquire heritage value. They reflect changing relationships between people and the underground world. The cave preserves not only ancient history, but also the history of how people chose to experience it. Scientific cave mapping is never completely finished, because new connections can still be found in systems that have been studied for decades. A cave that seems well known may still contain hidden branches, tight continuations, or unmapped overlaps with nearby systems. Mapping is therefore both careful science and a continuing conversation with the unknown. The final map is often still in the future. Cave science increasingly connects geology with biology, archaeology, hydrology, and climate records, rather than treating caves as only rock features. This broader view reflects how caves actually work. They are places where water shapes stone, animals shape nutrient flow, humans leave traces, and sediments record environmental change. A cave is most fully understood when many kinds of knowledge meet there. Blue holes and marine caves are useful to climate and storm researchers because their sediments can preserve long environmental histories. Layer after layer, material can settle quietly and hold evidence of past conditions. Scientists can read those layers to better understand storms, sea level change, and environmental variation through time. These dark, water-filled spaces can become subtle recorders of the past. Cave microbiology matters because microbes can influence mineral chemistry, energy flow, and even cave formation itself. Tiny organisms may help drive reactions, transform compounds, or support food webs in places where larger life is limited. They are easy to overlook because they are often invisible without special study. Yet in caves, the smallest living things can have surprisingly large effects. The sulfuric acid story at Carlsbad is partly a microbial story, because sulfur-oxidizing bacteria helped generate the acid that transformed the limestone. This means microbes were not merely living in a cave, shaped by other forces. They were participating in the chemistry that helped shape the cave. In the quiet underground world, microscopic life became part of monumental geology. Cave sediments host abundant prokaryotic life that helps cycle organic carbon and transform organic matter. Even in still-looking cave mud or sediment, biological activity can continue at microscopic scales. These microbes help process what enters the cave and influence how nutrients move through the system. A cave floor can therefore be biologically active even when it seems motionless. Cave researchers often learn as much from what enters a cave from outside as from what forms inside it. Water, sediment, nutrients, organic debris, and even pollutants can all tell important parts of the cave's story. A cave is shaped not only by internal processes, but by everything that flows, falls, or is carried into it. The boundary between outside and inside is often more porous than it appears. A cave may preserve fossils spanning immense timescales, as shown by Wind Cave's paleontological record of about 350 million years. That kind of range gives caves a rare ability to connect very different eras of Earth history. A single region can hold traces from ages far older than human life, alongside more recent biological records. Caves can therefore act as deep archives of time. Fossils, artifacts, mineral deposits, and living cave fauna all demand different protection strategies even within the same cave system. What preserves a painting may not preserve a bat colony. What protects a fragile crystal may differ from what protects a fossil-bearing deposit. Cave management is complex precisely because so many valuable things coexist there. Cave access is often a scientific compromise between public education and the need to preserve fragile conditions. It is valuable for people to see caves, learn from them, and develop appreciation for them. But every visit also has the potential to alter the environment. Management therefore often tries to balance wonder and restraint, allowing learning without asking the cave to bear too much. The same cave may matter to indigenous history, modern labor history, ecology, and geology, all at once. This layered meaning is one reason caves can be so emotionally and intellectually powerful. They hold many human and non-human stories together in one place. Looking at a cave carefully often means listening to several histories at the same time. Cave hazards are diverse, including unstable terrain in some settings, disease exposure in guano-rich sites, drowning risk in flooded passages, and low oxygen danger in certain marine caves. This variety reminds us that caves are natural environments with real risks, not controlled indoor spaces. Each cave type carries its own challenges. Respect for caves includes respect for the conditions they contain. Cave exploration produces new knowledge not only when a brand new passage is found, but also when old passages are remeasured with better tools. More accurate instruments can refine maps, clarify elevations, reveal subtle connections, or correct long-standing assumptions. Discovery is not always dramatic in appearance. Sometimes it arrives quietly through better measurement. Cave records can change public history, as happened when Mammoth Cave archaeology revealed extensive prehistoric mining rather than casual wandering. That kind of finding reshapes how people imagine the past. Instead of picturing ancient visitors as occasional explorers, the evidence shows purposeful work, repeated entry, and organized activity. A cave can therefore revise human history as much as it preserves it. Cave protection often extends to the surrounding landscape because surface vegetation, recharge patterns, and land use strongly affect underground stability and biodiversity. The cave does not begin only at the entrance. Its real ecological footprint often includes woods, soil, streams, sinkholes, and the wider terrain that feeds it. To protect the underground, people usually have to care for the above ground as well. Cave systems demonstrate that landscapes are three-dimensional, with major ecological and hydrological processes happening far below the surface. Much of what shapes a region may be invisible from above. Water can move under hills, species can live in hidden pools, and passages can stretch under fields and forests. Caves remind us that land is not only a surface. Some caves are preserved because they are difficult to reach, while others require active management precisely because they are easy to access and therefore more vulnerable. Isolation can act as natural protection, but accessibility often increases pressure. The easier a cave is to enter, the more carefully it may need to be managed. Convenience can become a conservation challenge. The scientific value of a cave often increases over time because new techniques such as improved dating, mapping, and biological analysis reveal things earlier visitors could not detect. A cave can therefore become more meaningful without changing physically at all. As science grows more precise, the cave offers new layers of information. The same old passage can become newly informative. Caves are one of the clearest places where geology shapes biology directly, since the structure of the rock controls water, climate, and habitat. Passage size, rock chemistry, moisture, and airflow all influence what kinds of organisms can live there. The physical cave sets the rules within which life must operate. In caves, the link between landform and living form is especially visible. They also show the reverse relationship, because biological activity from bats and microbes can reshape cave chemistry and resource availability. guano can feed food webs and influence deposits, while microbes can drive chemical reactions or alter the way materials are transformed. So caves are not places where rock simply controls life in one direction. Life also feeds back into the cave. What makes caves scientifically powerful is that they combine slowness and sensitivity. They often change gradually over long spans of time, yet they can record disturbance very clearly. That means they preserve both patience and evidence. A cave may grow, dissolve, settle, or accumulate in slow motion, but even small disruptions can leave lasting marks. Taken together, cave research shows that underground spaces are not empty voids, but integrated systems of rock, water, minerals, life, and human history. The longer people study caves, the less simple they become. They turn out to be quiet places where many stories meet and remain softly held in darkness. And as the world above settles for the night, it is peaceful to remember that far below, these patient hidden landscapes continue their slow, silent work.